Hello. In this episode, I'm going to go over data in Cobol. So this is going to be things like how do we handle decimals? How do we initialize decimals? How do we initialize correctly spaces and zeros and this kind of thing? And how do we deal with positive and negative numbers? And if there's enough time, I'll throw in some stuff about move and how we can do multiple moves. To begin with, I'm going to look at decimals. So if I look at this program that we have here, and there's a couple of things going on in this program, but what I want to look at is the decimals. So I'm just going to comment that out. And now it's compiled. This one here is going to be displayed, and it's going to be displayed from this here. So it's going to display this as well. So let's run it. So it asks us to enter a number, and I put in 6. And then what it does is it displays, if I zoom in here, it displays 00006. Now, if you remember, it does that because up here we have given it all of these digits. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 digits. Okay. Now, I could shorten that, but I'm going to leave that as it is for now, and you'll see why in a minute. What happens if I want to put in a negative number? What happens then? Or a decimal even. Let's try a decimal and see what happens. So if I run this program again and I enter 34.5, what happens? It gives us 34. It doesn't recognize the 0.5. So let's try it again to see if it's rounded. So I do 4.8. And it gives us just 4, so it just truncates it. So how are we going to deal with that? Well, it turns out there's a few things that we can do. So if I zoom in here, if I put let's put another 9 in there as well. So I've put a decimal in there. Will that do anything? First of all, I've got to save it and compile and then run it. And now I put 7.8. And what do I get? I get 7.8. So popping in a decimal there actually has helped. So what happens if I want to make that a minus? Let's run the program again, and I put minus 67.3. It doesn't recognize the minus. So if I go back, now if I put a minus at the front there, and this time I remember to save, I go back over here and we compile, and I'm going to clear this, and now we run again. So I do 50 minus 56.7. Now it recognizes the minus. Now, there can be a bit of a problem here. This is all right because it's just displaying. This here is just displaying. Now, if we were to start doing some maths with this, we're likely to run into a few problems. Let's take this one out. And let's put, right, so now we're going to be using this paragraph here. So it's going to compute some sum. and then it's going to display the answer. Let's use the negative and the negative, and we're going to put some decimals in there, and we're going to see if we can do some maths. Now, I haven't got an accept for this. What could I do? What could I do to initialize these? Well, it turns out we can use this reserved word, value, and then we put the value in there. So if I put minus 10, and this one, value, let's put 3. We'll just put 3 in there. Let's see what happens. So I'm going to have to save it. And then compile. We can see that straight away we've been given some error messages. There is something else that I could do here is I put that in there and recompile, and it still gives us the error messages because these are only good for display. What we need to do is do sign, and here we put V. We do the same here, and we do the same here. And then down in this value here, we're also going to put the S and a V. So I'm going to zoom in here so you can see what I've done. I've put in S for sign, and then we have V goes in the place of the decimal. Now, let's see if it'll let us compile now. Better save it. And it let us compile. So let's run it. And there we have minus 10 times plus 3 equals minus 30. Well, that's correct. It does. So that's an important thing for us to take away from this video. I'm not at the end. There's still more to come. But one important thing here is that these, if I zoom in here again, these values, if I'm displaying, then it's okay to use the minus sign and the period, the decimal. But if I'm doing any calculations, then I've got to use the S and the V. Okay? These zeros, some of these zeros are a bit of a problem, aren't they? It's like, especially down here, if we zoom down here, where we can see it's got minus 10, minus 10 is okay, plus 3, well, we really want to lose that 0 there, and then we've got 2 zeros there. It makes it a little bit difficult to look at, doesn't it? What could we do there? What if we had like loads of zeros? Let's say we did, so I could make this a shorthand. Let's put 4, and there we're going to put 3, and we do the same here, 4, and then 3. This shows you that it can be done in the shorthand. So we compile, and it compiles all right, and I run the program, and it still runs okay, even though we've used the shorthand there. But we want to get rid of these zeros, so what are we going to do? Well, it turns out that what we can do is we can put a Z in there, a Z in there, a Z in there, and a Z We don't want to put a Z in there. We can put a Z in. So now I've put these decimals in. We're gonna see if that works. And it's compiled okay, and then we run the program, and let's see what happens. It does give us the decimal there, but we still got to get rid of these leading zeros, these zeros at the front here, and we've got this down here. So what happens if I put Z, Z, and Z in? Right, because this is what you would do to get rid of the leading zeros. And it won't let us do it. Now, it could be that because what we've got here is an S, because it does say here about an error answer is not a numerical or edited name. It says something about Z or a multiplication sign which is before the decimal point cannot follow an S. So if I change that S, it was an S, wasn't it, to this minus sign, and then of course I'll have to change that to a decimal. And now let's see what happens. And it accepts it, right? And the reason why it accepts it is because this is now in display form. And where it works before, it was okay, but because we're putting these extra characters in and giving it extra information, we now need it in this display form. So it's important to understand both the forms. They're using the S and using the minus sign. So let's make sure that this works. And let's zoom in and see what's happened. And it has got rid of the leading zeros. Let's see if we can do this in shorthand. And we've got Z, and we put 3 in there. And now we compile it, and it compiles okay. And then we run it, and it works. So it looks like we can use the shorthand for it as well. So that's how we suppress the leading zeros, and why we have the two different forms of entering in these decimal values. So I did say about move, didn't I? Move. Now down here we've got bar sign, and it's hang on a moment. Let's before I do move, let's do this. Zeros and zeros. Now, why am I doing that? Doing zeros and zeros is because it is initializing these to 0. So you could put the initial value as 0, but that might be misunderstood. So if you put zeros, and then we go and compile, and it compiles fine, and then we run the program, and of course it comes back with 0 because it's all been initialized as 0. You can, if this was an alphanumerical value, you could have space, but it's not an alphanumerical value. So we've been over the display signs. It's move. So if I have verse sign, let's make this an alphanumerical value. So we would have X, and then we're going to put 4, it is worth remembering, but with these numerical values, that they're going to be truncated. If you haven't got enough values, if you don't give the memory enough space, it's going to cut the end of the number off. And with the decimals, it will truncate from both ends. So always make sure that you've got enough value and enough memory allocated to it with these 9s and with the x's. So this one's got like 4 x's. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of that. I'm going to make another one there and another one there. And we're going to put that as 1, that is 2, and this is 3. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to display, and this is going to be now 1. I'm going to display all of these. So this one becomes 2, and this one becomes 3. And the initial value is going to be, you can use is as well, is, and I'm going to put Tony, and this one is going to be, value is, just to show you can do both, this one is going to be Ryan. So let's declare. It says verse sign is not defined. All right, okay. It should be 1, that's why. And now I try compiling it again, and that's fine. And then if I run the program, oh, the other bits come up there as well. Just forget the zeros. Enter a name. So let's put Bill. And it returns because it's accepted it in, so it returns Bill is ver1, but the others have still, they're initialized, Tony and Ryan. They're still Tony and Ryan. Okay, I want them to display all of this number. Tony and Ryan are going to get wiped out. Sorry about that. So what's going to happen? How are we going to do that, right? So we do move, and then we have 2. This is, we don't want a period there. To this one, and we want to move it to this one as well. Now I can do this. I pop that in there. And what it's going to do is it's going to move it to these values here, these values. I can actually, let's try and make this a bit clearer. All right, so now we're safe. I go over here and let's see if it works. And it does compile. So what we've done here is we've moved versine 1. So these should all be the same. They should be whatever I enter. Yeah? So do this, and it asks me to enter the name. And I'll zoom in there so we can see a bit better. And this time I'm going to put Fred. So it should return all Freds, yeah? And it does. So that's how you can move a single value into multiple variables. And I could have put more variables there, you know, and got them to be displayed. It didn't just have to be 2, it could be more. So to summarize this lesson today, you can initialize values with numerical and with alpha values, depending on whether it's alphanumerical or whether it's an alpha value. You can set zeros and you can use space, because like if I do that, I don't have to do that. I could just do space. And if I take that out, and then enter a name, it says Tony, and then it gives a space and then Tony down there. So it's moved it from there to there, but it didn't move it into this one because I asked it not to. But it has noticed what space is. So we have space there. Other things is we use S for the sign and we use V for decimal when we're doing actual calculations. But when we want to display, then it's best to use this negative symbol and an actual decimal and use the Z, because otherwise it won't work. It won't allow the Z to suppress any leading zeros. And that's the lesson for today.